Hey, it's Paul Balancing with GreatDad.com, and I'm here with my weekly series talking to modern dads. And I've got a new twist today. We're going to be talking a little bit about podcasts with an expert, Joe Casabona. So, welcome, Joe.
Thanks so much, Paul. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, so this should be fun. I saw you the other day at a big group meeting on how to podcast, all the different ways to make money on podcasting, how to set it up and everything. I think you were doing one on kind of setting up workflows on podcasts. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about this because I think there are probably a lot of dads who maybe think, hey, I should start a podcast. Everybody's doing it. And I'm a dad and I'm into that and I feel strongly about it. Why not start a dad podcast? That would be something new. I bet that's never been done before. So So you actually started a podcast for like the solopreneur parenting podcast, kind of like how to fit in doing podcasts while a dad. So maybe you can give us some perspective on just how hard it is.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been podcasting over 10 years. And so my
Wow.
first podcast was like me and a bunch of friends talking about things we didn't know anything about, like most podcasts back then. And then my next and current show, it was originally called How I Built It, launched shortly before How I Built This. Um, after 8 years, I decided, you know what? I'll let NPR have the name.
Right.
And I rebranded to the Streamlined Solopreneur. And part of the reason for that was between when I launched that show and when I rebranded, I became a dad to three small kids. And so my focus in my business and who I was serving changed considerably from, to freelance web developers to parents who are also trying to run their own business, which I think a lot a lot more cropped up since 2020, which is when I started to shift. Um, and so kind of how you can be present as a father and still run a business that supports your family.
Yeah, we've done other shows on that kind of that balance between like giving up a corporate job that's really stressing you out or choosing something that may be, even more stressful if you're doing it at home. And I think that I'm sure you've got some good experience in how you do stuff at home as a solopreneur, even though you've got kids 2 to 7, running around and
Yeah, running right above me.
well, maybe do you have just one tip for dads who are solopreneurs before we get into the real podcasting talk?
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing is have a dedicated space where you work, right? I think one of the best decisions I made when my kids were smaller, they're still small, right? But
Yeah.
um was I was never going to bring my laptop into the kitchen or into the dining room. I didn't want to work where family time was happening. Now that changed a little bit during the pandemic because when you're at the house all the time, sometimes you want to change the scenery, but I still try to hold pretty steady to that rule of when I'm upstairs, I'm lucky enough to have like a basement office. When I'm upstairs, um I don't want to be distracted with my laptop because those are the days when my wife's a nurse and when she's at work, I'm watching the kiddos and I'm taking care of my children by myself. And if I have my laptop there, that's when it goes poorly because I'm not giving them enough attention. And then they're getting like rammy and upset. And then I'm getting frustrated because I can't do what I'm trying to do. And so it goes better for everybody when I have a dedicated workspace.
Yeah, I think that's such just good advice that we talk about in a lot of different other ways. And I think you can't say it often enough is like when you're with your kids, try to be as 100% present as you can. And when you're at work, do your work. And if you can separate them geographically or physically, that's the ideal way. So I started a podcast about, well, maybe even longer than you did, like 20 years ago, but it
Oh,
was
wow.
just me interviewing my then like 4 or 5 year old daughter. And I thought, oh my, all the in-laws and parents will want to tune into this podcast. They could never figure out, even the technology back then. So
Yeah.
fast
Yeah.
forward, I started doing podcasts, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago after starting GreatDad.com and trying to create resources for fathers. And when I started, there weren't a lot of podcasters. There were very few people doing anything for dads, a handful of guys. And now there are a lot of people doing podcasts. And so I guess the first question to you is about podcasting for dads is like, do you think there's a business opportunity out there for dad thinking, hey, I can milk, my experiences with my partner, my kids, the school and everything for something that could be really a fun and lucrative podcast?
I think that's a really interesting question because the answer is always like, yes, it's possible, right?
Mhm.
What I tell people is when you're starting a podcast, the best thing you can do is define a mission statement, right? And that mission statement answers three questions. Who do I help? What problem do they have? And how do I help them solve that problem?
Right.
So if it's just like an audio journal as you being a dad, that may not hook people, right? Or if you're saying this is for all dads, but like if again, I'm a self-employed solopreneur dad whose wife is a nurse and we're not doing summer camp. So like I could have started a podcast talking about like what does life look like with two parents who have non-traditional schedules and how do we manage that, right? Or if you have my friend Brian has a son with type 1 diabetes. It's his middle child. He and his wife are both self-employed or were at the time. So like maybe a podcast around that could be very helpful to dads who are trying whose kids require an extra level of care. So I think if you have an angle like that, it's really good, right? And it doesn't have to be as serious as that. My daughter loves playing with Lego. Maybe I do a video podcast of us playing with Lego, and maybe that's really interesting to people. But I think you want to serve a specific audience, even if it's within the bigger audience of dads.
Yeah, I think that's a really good comment. I think maybe I'm very general in this podcast. I'm trying to serve dads with just a affirming message of fatherhood and talking to a variety of people. But I love the idea of really niching down. Like if you had a child with type 1 diabetes and that's a big focus, there are probably a lot of dads out there who are struggling with that and would tune in just for one thing, for the solidarity of the fact that you're doing it together, then that common learning of tips. Now, I've talked to a lot of dads who kind of get into this for a little while, and we both know, having being in the podcasting community, that I don't maybe you know better than I do what's the average number of podcasts that people do before they drop out. So that's an interesting angle on this, is how dedicated should you be? How many episodes do you have to be in to be like considered somebody who's doing it for more than just a laugh?
Yeah, that's a real good question. So, on average, 70% of podcasts never make it to an eighth episode.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big number, right? That don't even make it 2 months, assuming you're doing a weekly podcast. And there's a lot of reasons for it, right? I think that a lot of people go in, and I don't know about your audience, but I'm going to pick the biggest podcaster in the world. His name is Joe Rogan. People probably listen to Joe Rogan show and he goes, "How hard can podcasting be? This guy just talks to somebody for
I know.
3 hours,
I
right?"
know. Right.
But it's really hard. Joe Rogan has a team. He probably talks to that person for a lot longer than 3 hours, and then they just like do a good job of editing it down to 3 hours, which is crazy. That's a long time.
6 hours down to three. Yeah.
Yeah, that's like so. But I mean, that said, I do listen to a 3 hour long live stream after every House of the Dragon episode. So if you like the content, you like the content, right? So, but what you don't see, right? There's a lot of work into making something look effortless.
Yeah.
And I think people see the effortless part, right? It's like, oh, I can, Juan Soto is not special, right? I can hit a baseball or whatever. No, that's like the hardest thing to do in sports, right? But he makes it look really easy.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons that it's called pod fade, right? Like their podcast just kind of disappears. And I would say, like, if you are dedicated to it, most statistics are for an active podcast, look at, have you published a new episode within the last 3 months,
Mm.
which is a long time,
Yeah,
but
that is
so that's
long.
a pretty generous move. And that's less than 500,000. Last time I checked, it was like 330,000 or maybe 400,000. Um, of the 4 million or so
Hmm.
podcasts that are in directories.
Right. So do you have an idea of how many people actually are doing them weekly, ongoing, and for more than a year?
Yeah, that's another great question. I don't have those numbers off the top of my head.
I know we get smaller and smaller. Yeah.
Yeah, weekly is the most popular. but most podcasters have been well, not most, but yeah, like podcasters will have been listening to podcasts for less than a year. And then I think, gosh, I just heard this stat actually. If you make it to 200 episodes, I think you're in the top 10% of
Yeah,
podcasts.
probably even smaller than that.
So yeah, so like if you're doing weekly, that's like a little shy of 4 years. But if you do it every week and you don't have bonus episodes and things like that, but yeah, so I would say like if you've been doing it weekly for a year, like you're probably in the top 25 percentile of podcasts.
And then in terms of the number of downloads or listens, I think when you get above 100, you're already in the top 80% or more. I mean, most podcasts, just to be realistic, are a very small number of listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm considered in the top. Well, it depends on who you ask, but I'll say top 5%.
Yeah.
I've seen top 2% as well. I've seen top 1.5%, but my show gets around like 20,000 downloads per month overall, and then around 1,000 downloads in the first 7 days per episode. So, and that's like, I mean, this is after downloads are like not a great metric because Apple like changed how they did it last year, and like down like before Apple's changed last year, I was getting like 60,000 downloads a month, right?
They're automatic downloads. And
Yeah, like this is a much more accurate number, but it just goes to show like, if you sold based on an 60,000 monthly downloads and then you're delivering 20, like your advertisers are going to be pretty mad. But so, I think the way I like to position viewership or listenership for people is, again, if we look at Joe Rogan, he just kind of like appeals to dudes, and
yeah,
there's like a lot of dudes, right? Not exclusively dudes, but mostly dudes. That's why he gets like 11 million downloads, right? But if you have a podcast about like underwater basket weaving, and there's like 1,000 people in the whole world who like underwater basket weaving, and you get 600 downloads, you've just captured 60% of your
yeah,
possible market. So like that's an amazing number, right? It's
yeah.
not 11 million, but it's 60% of your addressable audience, which is great.
Right. Yes. So how many viewers, listeners do you need to have to make any kind of money on this? I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a basic question. Is
Yeah,
it
yeah.
prefer it to
I'm
become a
gonna
little bit
say
more than a hobby?
I'm gonna say something that sounds apocryphal, but it's absolutely true. I got my first sponsor with 0 downloads.
Oh, well, yeah,
Um,
okay,
Someone reached, and this is okay. Like the big thing there is like I was already established in that niche,
sure.
and these brands already knew who I was. And I was like, hey, I'm launching a podcast. Would you want to sponsor it? And they're like, yeah, I trust you in what you do. Right. So I think more important than the number of downloads or the number of views is your trustworthiness within your niche. Your reputation, I think, is the word I should probably use there. Right. And so I think like it's going to be easier if you have a huge audience, right, to get sponsors. But, I work with mostly small audience creators, and I help them, close brand deals. I'm a sponsorship coach with my friend Justin Moore at his company Creator Wizard. And so like we help creators of all sizes get sponsors. And so it's really about the way you position it, because brand deals are not necessarily just about conversion. Some are about brand awareness, right? Where it's like, hey, we just want people talking about
Yeah,
us.
buzzing. Yeah,
And like on a podcast, that's great, right? Because like most podcasts are the person who sponsored the first episode of my like then How I Built It, now Streamline Solopreneur. If you go to streamlined.fm/001, there will still be a link to that website with their logo. So they paid, it was my first sponsorship. I charged them $100 8-ish years ago, right?
yeah,
And it's still going for them. So there's a big benefit to, hey, you can pay me to put out content to talk about you, and within reason, I'm probably never going to take it down, right? It's just going to be there for
right,
people to find whenever they're ready to find it.
right.
So it's
So,
about finding the right deals, I guess.
so you're kind of an outlier, but if somebody were to say they were having, great time with their kids and they want to do a podcast today, I mean, would you say you could make a lot of money if you had no reputation. You've got a generalized niche, and would it be worth doing for that purpose?
I would say start the podcast and have a way in mind that you would want to make money, but don't expect to make money right off the bat, right? I've heard people say, don't even think about money when you first start your
Yeah.
podcast. And that's saying, don't even think about where you're going to put the bathrooms in your house until you have your house. Like, no, you still need like plumbing in the
Yeah.
house. So like,
Yeah.
I think thinking about it is smart, right? So if, you know, if again, if I did a Lego podcast with my daughter, right? A couple of ways I might be able to make money is I wouldn't reach out to Lego right away. They don't need me to talk about them, right? Or at least not at that moment, but
Right.
maybe affiliate links, right? Links to Amazon or better places with better affiliate links that are selling Lego sets
Mhm.
could be a good way to do it. Hey, my daughter and I are going to build this today. Buy it in the link below to
Follow
support
along.
this channel, right? Or like Lego adjacent companies or companies that want to reach to the same demographic as Lego, right? Aura Frames is a good one for that,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Hey,
yeah. I love Aura frames. Yeah.
yeah, right.
Right.
Do you want to? They're not a sponsor, but not of
Me
me at
neither, but I
least.
love
Yeah,
them. I
right.
have
But
done
like,
reviews on them.
yeah, and you could like the ad could read itself. Like, hey, I take a picture of me and my daughter after every time we finish a Lego build. How great
Oh,
would it
cool.
be to have those pictures rotating, right?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's you build an audience. I would say start a mailing list when you start your podcast. So that's like a little extra work, but you're capturing that is a very measurable and engaged audience. And so even if it's like, hey, if you want to see the pictures of the final result of these builds, join the mailing list. I send a picture out every week.
Yeah.
Right now you have your podcast and your newsletter, which maybe could get sponsors, or it's another place to put your affiliate links.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or you can have a build of the month club and start like a membership with other dads who want to build Lego with their daughters.
So I think we've covered niche and brand potential for money. I think one key thing I want to say about the money thing is that quite often we don't realize when we get into these things that some of the money making part doesn't just necessarily come. It's not like you're putting out TV content out there and you don't need a sales group. You need you have to have some sales skills, but also the motivation to do a little bit of that outreach that you just mentioned. And not everybody likes to do that in their spare time. I mean, they might love the podcasting, but not the sales.
Yeah. What an excellent point. Because people will ask me, like, hey, how many downloads do I need to have before brands start reaching out to me? And I'm like, brands aren't going to reach out to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unless you're huge on TikTok or Instagram, brands aren't going to reach out to you.
Yeah.
You need to reach out to them and tell them why they want to be aligned with you.
Yeah.
Right. And that like you said, it's sales, it's a little bit of wherewithal, it's education, right? You need to educate the brand on why you're a better partner than Ryan's World or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, gosh, even just saying that like made me shudder. I don't know how old your kids are, but Ryan's World is just like it hurts me physically.
But that is so key. I mean, especially if you're just getting going and you've got a 9 to 5 job, or an 8 to 10 job, or whatever it is that people usually have, and you're trying to figure out, like, now I'm going to start, I'm going to put in 20, 30 hours developing a sales package for something that might net me $800. Is that motivating to you to really get into this beyond the fun of podcasting?
Yeah, that's really tough, right? I would say, because another thing and another reason people probably quit is they don't realize that much. I mean, like, we're talking to dads here. In my approximation, dads have pretty expensive hobbies. I like Lego. Like, Lego is like a real thing I like to do, but I also collect fountain pens and smoke
Oh,
cigars.
yeah.
Like, I don't have a cheap hobby. And podcasting can also be expensive, right? It's not like YouTube where you can just upload a video completely for free to YouTube. You're also, if you want to be an Apple Podcast and Spotify and things like that, you're probably going to pay for audio hosting. There are free ones that exist. I generally advise against those because if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, sort of thing. And so you're kind of at the mercy of, Spotify for podcasters is the free one that a lot of people go to. If Spotify decides they don't like your content, they can just take it down, or they can start monetizing it for them. There's inherent risk involved, or they can, like, they help podcasters monetize, and they can tie up those funds and maybe you don't see them for a long time, or they like just like I read a story recently about how Spotify disappeared this podcast basically, and they were able to bring her back and get her money back, but she lost all of her followers. Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
So there are, I would say if you're testing the waters, like a free host like Spotify for podcasters is good. If it's something where you do intend to make money or build out as part of a side hustle, hosting is definitely something that you should pay for. But then you also have the gear, you have recording tools, right? Like we're recording on one recording tool now. There are a bunch of other ones that I recommend. So like it could, if you have an editor, right, you're going to hire maybe you hire an editor or you buy the editing software. There's a
Yeah.
lot of, it feels like you're getting nickeled and dimed, but if you're going to produce a podcast and like really try to start to make money with it, I think that there's a higher level of investment than I think people realize.
Yeah, so let's talk about that just to give people an idea of the equipment and what's involved, because you can do it on a MacBook using a Mac microphone and a FaceTime camera just to start out. I don't know if anybody wants to listen to that too long because that doesn't quite have the same sound quality. But if you getting a microphone like both you and I have, my desk isn't that stable. We have this microphone, you got a boom, you got some sort of lighting, maybe you've got a green screen behind you. It does add up even if you're getting budget items on those things. Do you think it's possible, because you do see sometimes in the reviews is like, here's a $35 microphone that's as good as a Blue Yeti or is as good as a Shure or whatever, or here's a boom, you don't have to spend $200 on a boom arm, or all the rest of it. Are there low cost items that are as good or good enough to start with?
Yeah, I think there are. I have a blog post called like how to start a podcast for under $100, where most of the cost is going to be your microphone. I think that a good microphone that you can get is the Samson Q2U. That's Samson Q2U. There's also the ATR 2100. I will link to all of this on the resource page I'm going to put together for this.
Yeah. Okay.
But I think those two are good, like sub $70, maybe sub $80 microphones. The ATR 2100X was like $35 for Prime Day. So I'm sorry we missed that,
Yeah.
but I would
It'll
keep
come
an
back.
eye on that, because I mean, if it went on sale once, it'll probably go on sale again. And that's going to sound way better than the built-in microphone. 80% of people who abandon content abandon it because of bad audio.
Yeah.
Way more, like people are more forgiving of bad video, but if you
Interesting.
have bad audio, it does make it hard to listen to. So even if people stick it out, they're working a lot harder to understand what you're saying, and that cuts at your authority, because then people are focusing on like what are the actual words you said, and they're not really processing what you're saying.
Right.
So if you're going to invest anywhere, I say invest in a good microphone. A boom arm is like, you can get a $13 boom arm. A boom arm is the thing that keeps your microphone out of your face and off of your desk, so that when like you hit your desk, it doesn't shake or anything like that, right? And so you can also kind of position it. I just got a new boom arm for Prime Day, but so you can position it in a nice way. I think those are the two big investments you want to make. And then as far as, and like I think I can show you this. Let me see. So I'm right here, and then I've got my office view, so you can kind of see my desk.
Oh yeah, you guys, yeah.
Yeah, this gets released on YouTube, right? I think I read that in the
Yep.
notes.
Yep.
So you can see like this is overkill, right? I've got like a board right here. I've got these lights and like a whole bunch of other extra stuff that most people don't need that, right?
Yeah.
And so I think starting with a simple microphone, and if you're going to do video, don't use the built-in camera, though they're getting better. Like I would say get a decent camera. The Elgato face cam is the one that we just saw, right? And okay, like that's going to look a lot worse than this, but this is like a $1,000 setup, because I've been doing this for over a decade and I've invested over time, right? You can see what my first desk looked like over at Casabona.org/desk. It didn't look anything like this, but that and then good lighting is going to be more important than
Mhm.
an amazing camera, because if you are well lit, the camera doesn't have to work as hard.
Yeah.
And so I think those are really important. Yeah.
That's an important point because I just did a bunch of research on this as well. Is I upgraded to an MX Brio after using a Polycom, which is horrible, which is the intermediate step probably between what I have. There are a bunch of other cameras in that $200 range that are good enough. But to get to what you have right there, the kind of the background that's a little fuzzy and you are in focus, that is going to cost you. You're going to have to buy a DSLR and mount that, and that's going to cost you upwards of $1,000 for getting the right kind of DSLR, because it's not just any type of DSLR. It has to be a little bit better than the regular one.
Yeah. So I have the Sony A6400. That's been a long recommended one. I think that Canon has one out now. I think it's the M50.
Hmm.
That's been like kind of purpose built for like using it as a webcam. The lens is going to be more important than the body. So I have a 16 millimeter Sigma. Gosh, it's been so long since I bought it, but the lens is $300, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's how I get this effect. It's a blur. It's a bokeh effect. It's not a green screen. And I thought that looked really nice. And I kind of hit the lottery because I bought this stuff in February 2020 and made a video about it in February 2020.
Yeah.
And then in March 2020, this video and all of the affiliate money for it exploded. Like that video paid for this setup basically.
Yeah.
And so it continues to be like my most popular video on YouTube.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be a gear YouTuber. So like I'm just like kind of out of luck. That's just the one.
Yeah, it is easy to get carried away.
Well, right. Yeah.
So there are two related questions there. Well, I guess one directly related question and then another one I want to talk about. But is it easy, just in general, if you're going to do a podcast, should you just go ahead and do a YouTube version as well? My answer would be yes, but you may have a different idea.
If you asked me 2 years ago, I would have said no. Today, absolutely. Yeah. YouTube has invested a lot of money into podcasting. And while they do have a way, like an RSS ingestion, it's called, right? So you sign up for a host, RSS.com or Captivate or Buzzsprout, like whichever one you choose, which I guess I should disclose. I am an RSS.com evangelist. So I mentioned them first. And so I feel I should disclose that. But no matter who you go with, you're going to get an RSS feed that you submit to all of the directories. And now you can also submit it to YouTube and it'll create an audio only video for your channel.
Yeah.
However, I think part of the reason I would have said no 2 years ago is I would have told you nobody just watches side by side videos. There is data now that says otherwise. And my experience actually says otherwise, right? Because every day for lunch now, I watch Baseball Today with Chris Rose and Trevor Plouffe. And they're just sitting there talking. But I don't know. I mean, sometimes they have video of whatever play they're talking about, but I could listen to that. But I choose to watch that. They usually live stream during lunch, my lunch. And so that's what I choose to watch. So my experience and habits have changed. And I think that's going to continue to change. And YouTube is the second biggest search engine. And sure. I suspect it's going to become one of the best discovery engines for podcasts because over 30% of American adults now use YouTube to listen to podcasts.
Yeah. Do they have a direct to podcast button too, where they host your podcast?
They don't. So if you upload it to YouTube, it's only going to be on YouTube.
Right.
And they've said pretty explicitly that they're not going to build in that sort of functionality. So the two ways for you to utilize YouTube would be record your audio only podcast, upload it to your podcast host, and then use YouTube's RSS ingestion to have YouTube pull it from your podcast RSS feed, or record a video version, upload that to YouTube, and upload the audio to your podcast host.
Yeah.
Which is what I do for podcast workflows, my podcast on podcasting.
Yeah.
I don't do that for Streamline Solopreneur yet because the audio first of all, that's like a legacy podcast if we're talking in YouTube terms. I launched that podcast before podcasting was ever a twinkle in YouTube's eye. But now my editor has started doing video edits. And so I put audio quality above everything on that. And since he's doing video with audio now, I'm going to start experimenting with releasing the video on YouTube. So we'll see how that goes. But I think if you're starting today, it's kind of a must.
Yeah.
Even if you're going to record like a talking head video and there'll be some cuts for editing, I think that's really important. But like, I mean, I have a bunch of tools to make my videos more dynamic too. So there's like a couple of things you can do to make that better.
Yeah. So, well, my workflow used to be putting it all into doing a Zoom, which we are using Zoom, which is one of the ways you can record it. It actually is more effective than a lot of stuff out there that you could pay money for, surprisingly, because now it has HD, and if you have a good camera, it works pretty well. They hold on to your recordings, etc. But I used to take that video and then put it in iMovie, and then put a top and a tail on it, and do any kind of editing there, and then put it on YouTube, and then move it to. There's a lot of work that goes on in that kind of workflow. So anybody thinking of doing this for more than just the audio or whatever, you need to be aware that there's some stuff there that you may not like as administrative tasks. One way around there is a VA, but it sounds like you've also done a lot of work on workflow simplification as well.
Yeah. So the tool that I use, and the really crucial one, and it's a virtual camera too, so I can kind of demonstrate this. Anybody who's watching this video already saw when I switched to camera B back here, is I use Ecamm Live. So it'll make these layouts that I can then kind of put in instead of having to edit the videos that way, right? So Paul, you probably saw this when I was
Right.
talking, I had the link up on the screen. And so there are a few ways that I'll do that so that I don't have to edit in the overlays and I'm really just like cutting for content. A couple of tools that I recommend for recording can also do this now. One is Riverside. Again, as Paul alluded to, Riverside is one that you would pay for. The big benefit of that is, and again, like I'm a huge audiophile, like I think the audio quality is super important, is Riverside will record the video and audio locally on your guest's computer and then upload it so that if they have like a bad internet connection where you get that robot voice or that freezing, that's not going to come through on the final recording. But now they also have an editing tool built in. And so they'll upload the video, combine it, and then you can do some editing in Riverside and then upload directly. I think you can upload directly to YouTube. If you can't do it in Riverside, Descript and Squadcast are a set that come together in a subscription where you record in Squadcast and then you can export to Descript. And Descript has a lot of really good tools where you're basically editing by editing a transcript, and they'll upload directly to YouTube and a bunch of podcast hosts.
Yeah. These are all the tools that if you're doing very much podcasting, you hear about every day. There's just a wealth of information here on stuff that's taken me quite a while to even learn the vocabulary on. So we've covered a lot of the stuff. I guess another reason why you might do this is just for fun. I know people who have, two dads have gotten together and they just, they get together weekly and they just chat for a while about being a dad, and it's kind of fun. And maybe they have a beer, and it's a time to connect with a friend they wouldn't necessarily be able to get out of the house to see, especially during COVID. But
Yeah.
or if you've got a 2-year-old, you're not spending a lot of time in the bar with a kid strapped to your
Yeah.
to your chest. And I think that's a perfectly cool thing to do if it's a way to get together with somebody who's in the same profession or has got the same hobby or is a dad. Why not? It's cool. It's fun. Other people, friends might enjoy it as well, but don't have a lot of, fantasies that you're going to make $1 million out of it.
Yeah. I think hobbies are so important. Like having, when I was a freelancer, I would talk to a lot of people, which I guess I still am. I guess the nomenclature has just changed a little bit. But when I was a freelance web developer, I would talk to other freelancers about their hobbies, and they're like, "Oh, I don't have hobby. Work is my hobby." And I'm like, "That is
Yeah.
devastating to
Yeah.
me." Like, you don't have any interests outside of work? Like, I mean, my hobbies help me be better at work, but and so like if you want to have a conversation and record it and put it out there for like other people to listen to, if they might connect, I think that's great. And if your show is a hobby, then like yeah, Spotify for podcasters is going to be really fine for you, right? It's really like there's coming from the development space, like rented land is something I always think about.
Mm.
Don't build your business on rented land. And so, but like if you're just hanging out and having fun, and you have an apartment, but you're going to buy a forever home in 2 years, rent away and see if you like it. That's another
Yeah.
thing. See if
Yeah.
you like it. And if you
Yeah.
like it and you're like, oh, I really want to grow this, You can
Yeah.
always move and invest more money into it.
Yeah, and see whether you like all the parts of it too. I think the getting on it for 35 minutes and having a chat with you is a lot of fun. But if I know that I've got all this other admin, editing, uploading, all this other stuff, that just weighs you down. And there was a while there before I got a VA that I was, 50, 60 episodes in. I was like, I love the conversations, but maybe I'll just throw away the recording after I'm done because the conversations were the cool part. So you could do one on your own, just you talking. You could do one with friends, two talking heads. You could be talking football or baseball, like you just said, or you could be interviewing people. And I think you and I probably both I found you on a service called Podmatch. We'd already talked before I actually saw you on this conference we were at, but there are services out there that are kind of like dating services where, if whatever your interest is, whether it's on nutrition or fatherhood or something like Legos or whatever, you can find experts or people who have the same interest as you to have these conversations. It's amazing that's available now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so. First of all, I'll say, like, yes, we both have interview shows. I think that like a solo podcast is the way to go for a lot of business owners who are
No.
trying to build their authority. Those are mostly who I help. But like, again, if you want to do a dad podcast where you want to talk to other dads, or you want to get together with a buddy and talk about, what it's like being like a doctor and a dad or whatever, maybe your buddy's a lawyer and you can call it legal custodians.
Oh, good one. That's a good one.
That's a Scrubs reference. Love that show. But anyway, my point being, yeah, there are a lot of great services out there. And I should say that like podcast guesting and podcast swaps are a really good way to in turn grow your podcast,
Mhm.
right? Because you're going where the audience already is. The people who are listening to other people's podcasts listen to podcasts,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is really effective. There's one more tool that I like to get more value out of these conversations too, is I use Magic, which is an AI service that takes our audio directly. I don't even have to do anything more than just put the YouTube link in it. And it takes our conversation and organizes it into the clips that maybe some of my listeners have seen on LinkedIn, articles that I've published that are mostly written by AI, and really takes the content that we're doing here and gives it second, third lives afterwards, which is really cool.
Yeah, I've used both Magic and Capshow.
Capshow, yeah.
Both are really good. I think Capshow is really like if you want to invest, Capshow is a great tool. It's a little more expensive than Magic. I suspect. Well, I don't know. I got the AppSumo deal for Magic. Yeah. I have strong opinions about AI writing. I've also written, like, I have like 5 books, so like I write a lot. But what it's really great for me is highlighting things that I maybe forgot to take notes on during the interview.
Yeah.
And so it'll be like, I'll ask it like, hey, what are the top 6 to 10 takeaways from this episode? And usually, it's like a couple I had in mind already. Like, okay, yeah, we really hit this part. But like one is, oh, I forgot they talked about that, right? And so it's really good at surfacing stuff, especially if you don't like. I've learned I'm very good at taking notes during interviews, but my clients are like, how do you do that? Um,
Yeah.
and so if you don't want to take notes, which Paul, I don't think you are, you want to be fully present, maybe. Oh, hey, nice, very nice. Then you could use a tool like Magic to help you rediscover or re-highlight the things that probably kept coming up.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Okay. Well, so to wrap up, unless there's something else we haven't covered, I think we've covered all the gear and the cost and the work involved. There's a lot going on here behind the scenes for a podcast. And just because Joe Rogan can seem like he can just talk on forever, that doesn't mean that you necessarily can, especially if you're alone. Oh, that is one more thing I wanted to add, is that if you are, because I have just supplemented my weekly podcast with another shorter podcast that's specifically on resilience, where I interview people, but I also do single standalones. If you are doing something on your own for even 10 minutes, say nothing to half an hour, you need to know what you're doing. You need to organize it correctly. You need to have more authority and, competence in that area. It's really just hard to just blabber on extemporaneously for more than a minute or two without having really a clear picture of what you're going to say. So just to wrap up, you do a lot of work with podcasters, with creators, even people just starting out. And I know you've got a URL for at podcastworkflows.com that you'll have something about the conversation we've had, but tell us a little bit about the services you offer and what the value is, or how that, moves you ahead faster in the process.
Yeah, so I'll start by saying I was set on this path because I had a panic attack in 2020. I was my wife's a nurse. I had my solo business and my podcast, which was a large portion of my income at the time. And I didn't have any time to do it because I had one and then two and then three kids at home. Like we went from one kid at the beginning of the pandemic to three kids by the end of the pandemic. And so I was really stressed. I had a panic attack. I was sitting on the floor in my kitchen when my 3-year-old came up to me and said, "It's okay, daddy. Everything's going to be okay." And I told myself I wasn't going to let that happen again. So from that moment, I was like, I'm going to put in the right processes, hire a VA, take everything I possibly can off my plate. And that's when I realized a lot of parents were going through this. Like I was giving talks and events like Podcasting Made Simple Live. And one of my first coaching clients said, "How do you run 3 podcasts and have 3 kids?" And I said, "Oh, this is the thing I can serve people with." So I'm a podcast systems coach. I do help a lot of parents because I totally understand the position you're in. And I help launch, grow, and automate podcasts. And so I'll help you launch with the right systems in place. I'll help you put a system in for growth. And I'll help you put in automations and delegate so that everything doesn't fall onto you, so that you can be a podcaster and a present parent. And so, and then if you have those things in place, you can leverage your podcast to make money. I still do. I have sponsors, I have affiliate links and a membership. And so that's how I help people. And because we talked about kind of the whole range of podcasting today, if you go to podcastworkflows.com/greatdad, you can download my podcast launch blueprint, which will kind of walk you through. It's like a self-paced template that'll help you launch your podcast. It has the gear recommendations I talked about and things like that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's great because we kind of made it, maybe we've made it sound more complicated than it is. And I think that there could be, you could make it super, super complicated, but I think we also talked about how you could just start today using Spotify, the free version of Spotify, and almost just directly do a podcast versus what we're doing with a little bit more work, or a lot more work. And so I think it's good for people to be aware that that it comes in different, different sizes and flavors, which is maybe takes the fear
Yeah.
out.
I think the beautiful thing about creating content or really doing anything online is that you don't need to build the entire building before people
Yeah.
start moving in, right? You
Yeah.
can launch and then iterate. And so
Yep.
launch your show, do it super messy, right? Like record a test episode to see if you like it that may never get released, but then launch and iterate. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh, my listeners really resonated when I had my wife on to talk about this thing that I did that I was stupid about or whatever, right? Like maybe I should do more of that. Not be
Yeah.
a stupid husband, but let your wife tell stories about that. So it's yes, both of us are well-oiled machines at this point, but I don't know about you, Paul, but I didn't start as a well-oiled machine. I didn't even know. I was just gonna like upload the audio to my WordPress website. And my friend's like, "No, you need a host." And I'm like, "Oh, I see."
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
So
Yeah. And I add to that, do what you love. I mean, it's not for everybody, just like the admin is not for everybody, but some people love editing and they're not meant to be behind a camera or just having conversations. And that's totally cool too, but do it because you love and you have a passion for it.
for sure, that's the thing that's going to carry you through
Yeah.
when it does
Yeah.
get long and annoying at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, you won't find motivate. Like, I don't know. My friend's like, "We should go golfing." And I'm like, "I hate golfing."
Yeah.
And he's
Right.
like,
Watch it.
I'm like, "I'm bad at it." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, it's really just like hanging out with your friends
Yeah.
and smoking cigars." And I'm like, "Yeah, we can do that without golf though. Like you
Yeah.
can just
Right.
do that on my deck. It'll be more fun for me."
Yeah. Exactly. Well, this has been a lot. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm glad you were able to share a lot of a lot of your hard learned lessons with us. And thanks for that link at podcastworkflows.com/greatdad. And I'm going to check that out because I'd like to see some of those product recommendations myself. Joe,
Awesome.
pleasure to spend some time with you, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul. This was great.
Yeah. And if anybody's interested in my coaching services, I coach on resilience and fatherhood, and you can find that at GreatDad.com/go. Okay. Till next time. Take care.